Hey everybody, this is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report. I wanted to do a report because of the government institutions, the intelligentsia, and everybody in an uproar because Trump met with Putin, because no other president has ever done that wrong, but also because he was critical of our intelligence agency, that he didn't believe our intelligence agency. The same intelligence agency that had Robert Clapper, just over 5 years ago, sit there in front of the Congress when he was doing this, and he lied about spying on American citizens. And now it's been past 5 years. They can't do anything to him. But to me, I thought it was almost comical that the MSM, the major media, is pushing this narrative. And people are buying into it because they're seeing the hysteria from those who truly hate Trump, which is fine if you hate him. But god damn, have a reason behind it. He was criticized roundly by everybody for doing that, taking the side of a hostile state. Not believing his own intelligence agency, because Mueller is a heroic Marine. Forget about him bringing uranium to Russia for the Clintons. Forget about his checkered past. Have you guys ever done a check on Mueller? This guy is no Boy Scout. The FBI aren't a bunch of Boy Scouts. There's some good ones, there's some good aces, but they're not all, especially the top hierarchy, and we're seeing that. Yet people refuse because I don't know if it's just that they see an opportunity to ding Trump, or if they're really that ignorant. So he criticized the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, these departments that were created in 1949, essentially, to spy on American people. We should have faith and not undermine the faith of these institutions. People have gone so far to blame him for the collapse of trust in government. It's not their own actions. It's not this guy and this Lisa Page and this Schluck guy, whatever his name is, sending hundreds of texts saying that they're going to decide the next government. It's not stuff like that does it. It's because Trump said he doesn't believe our intelligence agency. You, as a person, need to believe what you're told. That's the truth. And we won't accept anything else. That's how our intelligence agency works. But I was reading an article, and it went through some of the, it gave the 10 most prevalent situations where our intelligence agency was believed when it shouldn't have been. What you're seeing on the screen, Operation Paperclip, that was huge. Back in 1945, the Allies, we were advancing on Berlin, Russia from one side, the Allies on another. Army intelligence, because CIA wasn't around until 1949, part of the NSA. They captured over 1,600 Nazi scientists and engineers. People like Werner von Braun, who was a SS guy. And they brought him back to the United States. Didn't tell anybody. They wanted that technology. They wanted his intelligence. They wanted to know what they knew. Forget any of their history. Forget any of their alliances with the SS. Forget that Allied soldiers died in the name of defeating the fascism that was going on. Operation Northwoods. This involved the CIA. It was an operation. It was joint CIA-Pentagon proposal. It was designed around the idea of escalating war with Cuba. And they wanted to do this by stoking public anger. What it called for was the CIA and other U.S. government operatives were to go out, commit acts of terrorism against American civilians and military targets, then blame the Cuban government. I believe one was even to fly a plane into a building. The ideas were voted down by Kennedy. Oddly enough. The Allende coup. This is something I was watching today on a documentary. In 1970, Salvador Allende. He was elected the Chilean president. They didn't like that. Nixon led the government of the United States. We implemented economic warfare. We couldn't allow them to decide their own president because the direction he wanted to take his country in wasn't the direction that the United States wanted. So in response, the United States led a military coup. Hollande ended up shooting himself. The other one he mentioned, and this one's hard to pronounce, the Mossadegh coup in 1953. And it was interesting. I didn't really know about this until I read this article. And it talked about this prime minister of Iran and how he wanted to audit the incoming Anglo-Iranian oil company. And he wanted to limit the foreign control of Iran's oil. And within a few months, they had a joint U.S.-UK Operation Ajax, you can look it up, to remove Mossadegh's elected government and turned over full control of the state to the Shah. All our government, all our CIA. We don't even want to get into Iran-Contra and what was going on over there, where the drugs were basically being flown out of Little Rock, Arkansas. Oh, that was an interesting movie. Operation Mockingbird, CIA operation. Mockingbird was CIA project to coerce, to train, to control, to plant CIA-friendly journalists in the major news. Put them into all the MSM throughout the country. And it took a FOIA request for them to release internal memos before they would admit to it, before anybody would believe the independent journalists that were out there pushing the story. But after its existence, it was supposedly shut down. But how do we know that? How do we know it wasn't just renamed? So the next time you're out there listening to CNN, MSNBC, and all the other pundits, Project Mockingbird. It's a very interesting one. Very interesting indeed. If you look, I'm in the news, and if you look at much of the news that goes out, it's what the government is disseminating. Very little of it is questioned. I can tell you that. I've seen it. They take the information, they run with it. There is no fact-checking, or hardly any anymore. The mass surveillance. You know, it's not talked about much. What do I have to hide? Then leave your shower curtain open, I always tell people. The clappers of the world. We're not mass surveying anyone. Yeah, right. The deep state. They're spying everywhere. Just read this Edward Snowden documents if you don't believe it. They're looking at everything out there. They say they stopped it. But they made most laws to make it legal. And many loopholes that are out there. So they can continue. NARA. He named NARA. This was interesting. I think most of you guys might remember this one. Because I was in Operation Desert Storm. This was a girl. She was about 15. And she testified in front of the Congress. She claimed she volunteered at a Kuwait hospital. And in there she saw Iraq soldiers throwing Kuwait babies into incubators and leaving them there to die. They later found out, though, that her real name and that she was the daughter of a Kuwaiti ambassador. Conflict of interest, maybe. She never volunteered at the hospital. She's seen no babies, soldiers, or incubators. It was all a lie. A fiction paid for by the citizens of Free Kuwait, which is an NGO, which is run by no other than our CIA. By the time it came out, it was too late because Operation Desert Storm was launched. Thousands upon thousands have died. COINTELPRO. Everybody's heard of that, right? Counterintelligence program. They want to get out there. They want to survey, infiltrate, discredit, disrupt domestic political organizations. And you saw a lot of this. I was watching Roger Stone. No, Roger Stone. Oh, God, what's his name? I can't remember his name offhand. And it's a documentary, a series of documentaries covering each president. And they covered how this was used a lot during the Vietnam War and infiltrating political groups, mainly on the left. But if you're studying outside of what MSM puts out, you got to believe that this is maybe still out there. Ironically enough, the same thing, you got to wonder if they got that from Hitler or from the Germany, because Hitler was actually in a COINTELPRO type program, and they had him going in and infiltrating these extreme right groups. He went to one, started speaking, loved what they were disseminating, and joined the group. And I think it's still around. And, you know, in the same series, and the guy's name's going to hit me in a second because Alverstone. Is that it? Excellent series. He talked about MK Ultra too. Project MK Ultra. You know, it might sound like something sci-fi, but basically they were nervous about the Russians and some of the advances, and they wanted to try different things. They wanted to try to be able to control an individual, to have them do something without them realizing they're doing it. And a lot of people think that the guy that assassinated Robert Kennedy was part of this program because once they arrested him, he couldn't remember anything. And when they arrested him, he was in almost like a comatose state of mind. But basically, they're giving him LSD to soldiers to see what would happen. They do mass hypnosis and mass suggestions, torture, all kinds of stuff, studies on the effect of verbal and sexual abuse, all kinds of studies that were basically out there and carried out. We don't know the full extent of it because in 73, when Richard Helm took over the CIA, he basically destroyed all the MK Ultra files. Don't ask me how he was able to do that, but he did it. But there's other programs out there, like the Army Intelligence had Edgewood Arsenal. The Department of Defense had the Project 112. They said they were all halted in the 70s. But you got to wonder. I was listening to something, watching something. Maybe I was reading an article. And they basically said, it was a guy that was part of the CIA and everything. And he said, look, we don't stop these programs. We just rename them. He goes, why would we stop something that's effective? We just rename it. And we go through the whole process again. And we know once people find out, some people will get their hands slapped. But that's about the extent of it. The worst, though, like I said, was the Iraq War. You guys probably all remember Colin Powell sitting up there lying about the weapons of mass destruction. It was brazen the way they did it. A lot of lies. The president, the vice president, Secretary of Defense, Colin Powell, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI. They were headed up by this heroic person that we should all hold with the highest regard, Robert Mueller. They lied too. The press just repeated whatever the narrative or propaganda that the government put out. They didn't question it whatsoever. Operation Mockingbird. They weren't misinformed. They weren't mistaken. It was outright lies. They didn't do any research. They took what the government sent them because the government's right. The government wouldn't lie. The government's out for our best interest. These intelligence agencies would not do anything wrong. It led to a war where over 1 million Iraqis died. United States soldiers were killed. You know, our CIA, our involvement in Iraq-Iran war, where we essentially supported both sides. Who's that guy that wrote the book that found out about the CIA selling the drugs? Gary Webb. Selling drugs, pushing drugs, became, they said, LA's biggest crack dealer. Everybody ostracized him. Everyone said he was lying, blah, 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 but it all came out that his story was right on, dead accurate. Gary Webb. Watch the movie. Excellent movie if you haven't seen it. But these people, these agencies, these institutions, they don't deserve trust. They haven't earned our trust. They've abused our trust to such great lengths that we got to be wary of anything they say. And not to be wary is to live in a dream world, a la-la land. To go in and think that the deep state is looking out for your best interest. And these are only a couple of things. There's a lot more. You know, I could go on and on and on with all the stuff that the CIA has been involved in out there. NSA, CIA, all the 17 whatever intelligence agencies. The worst thing ever to come out of in 1949. Well, one of the worst, that and the industrial war complex. Jesus. It's all about dishonesty, hypocrisy, abuse of power. It leads me to say you should never trust the CIA. They prove they don't deserve it. So for the local media to push this narrative because they can't stand the conservative values that Trump's pushing out, or for these far left liberals that are pushing it too, be careful of what you wish for. You know, one day, I mean, conservatives, the right, whatever you want to call them, they're not always going to be in charge. One day you're going to be back in charge. And that same deep state may be working against you. Food for thought. What say you guys? All right, this has been Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report.